Mindfulness is a natural function of the human brain. It's not Tibetan, it's not Buddhist, it's just human. And it's something that we don't need to learn it. We're born with it. The moment you're born, you're full 100% mindful. That's all you've got. You don't have memories, you don't have language, you don't know how to think.
Expanding possibilities, the mindset zone.
I'm your host, Anna Melikian. I'm here to support you, increase your impact while preventing burnout. The Mindset Zone is a place to pause, increase your self-awareness, and embrace the experimentation mindset. Find more resources, including information about the Mindset Zone book and audiobook at mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com is .zone. Today, our special guest is Stephen Schettini, and Stephen was a Buddhist monk for 8 years. Afterwards, he became a husband, a father, and worked in Montreal writing, designing, and typesetting. Now he's an author, a coach, and a teacher, and there's a fascinating TEDx talk where he recounts part of his journey. I really suggest that you see this TED talk. So, welcome to Mindset Zone, Stephen.
Thank you, Anna. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. So, one of the things that you speak a lot nowadays is the importance of no wishful thinking. Can you expand on what you mean by that and why this is a key principle for you?
Wishful thinking is not just an obstacle. It's not simply something that's in the way. It's the entire focus of mindfulness practice, really. Wishful thinking arises from bias. And we are all biased. We all stand somewhere in this world. And that position, that place, gives us a certain perspective, and it blocks us from seeing other perspectives. So the bias, which is inherent to us, is to protect ourselves and make sure that we're consistent and that I'm always being the person I want to be, and that I want to represent myself the way I want people to see me. It's really complicated and confusing. And because of this bias, we twist the way we see things. We have this incredible gift of imagination, and we use it, among other things, to create spin. We spin our lives. People refer to the ego a lot in Buddhism. I try and avoid it because it's been used so much that people don't really understand the point of ego anymore. But ego is a process, and the process is one of basically building and defending ourselves. So in doing that, we create all sorts of illusions about who we are, and especially who we should be. And it's in trying to live up to who we should be that we misrepresent ourselves, not just to the world, but to ourselves. And mindfulness, of course, brings you right back to this present moment to see what's actually going on. And what's actually going on, if I look honestly, is that I'm fabricating myself. And when you start to see that, then things change. Your attitude, your mindset changes, especially towards yourself.
Okay, so many things here to unpack. So one moment. So I love the recognition that as human beings, we have this body, this existence that give us a point of view. And that point of view, we are in a moment in time with a particular set of biology, history, some of the things that we were born in a certain circumstances that we cannot decide that throw us in this world, that give the upbringing, and that give us a point of view and a bias. And also as human beings, we have this capacity of imagining, of creating other point of views, other biases that we can look the world through, that we can filter the reality, and many of them develop by a question of survival. And one of that is creating illusions or alternative versions of the world. And part of the wishful thinking is one of those, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And sometimes, what do you say, creativity, innovation is part of that capacity that we have of imagine things that are not there, and it's a good thing. But sometimes we create a distorts reality or distorts perspective of bias of reality that is not really serving us and prevent us to be who we can be.
Yeah.
And the meditation can be this incredible way of bringing us to the being, to where we are, that allow us to create or fabricate with our actions, with our intentions, something that we have some intentionality on it or something. So I don't know now I think I'm extrapolating a little, so take it from there.
I understand your dilemma. I'm going down rabbit holes all the time. And this is how we figure out what's going on. The point is about imagination. Yeah, if you're in the creative field, I mean, one of the things I do is design. And yeah, absolutely. Of course, we need to be creative and we want to use our imagination. It's when we use the imagination to reinforce our sense of self, to reinforce our sense of being a fixed, unchanging person. And that's not a conscious decision. Oh, I'm going to be fixed and unchanging. It's just a feeling that, oh, this is me. And it's the same me who was here yesterday and 20 years ago and 50 years ago. But it's not. Everything is constantly changing. When our imagination is contradicting reality, when it's contradicting our experience, then it's time to put it in its place. And it's basically this discernment, this being able to see this imagination is good and that imagination is not. It's not serving me, it's hurting me.
So why is discernment? Because we have as human beings these beautiful paradoxes. Because yes, the concept of self is part of our core identity, that we identify ourselves, at least in our Western society, as this individual with an identity that we can argue that serves us until a certain level. And you are putting the spotlight that if it's too fixed, it's like having a fixed mindset around that identity, doesn't allow us to flourish in a world that is the reality and of constant change, including for our identity. And by embracing the mindfulness and some of the teachings of the Eastern traditions, we can create some flexibility and some growth mindset, or some more, we can become able to deal with the change in a more healthier way. Something like that you are saying?
It's possible. The thing is that you talk about adopting the Asian way, but again, I mean, that's what I did. I hitchhiked to India to become a Buddhist monk, and I took a whole pile of illusions along with me and expectations. And I was biased to see Tibetan Buddhism as pretty well perfect. That's what I was looking for. I was so disappointed in the education I'd received in England, because it was just, I wanted more wishful thinking for me. This is the way I grew up. I expected my education to teach me how to live, how to be a human being. And of course, what they taught me was how to pass examinations.
Yeah.
So I threw all that up in disgust, and I went to the Tibetans, and then I wanted them to be everything. And for 8 years, I gave myself that freedom, But in the process, I ran into all sorts of brick walls because it's not realistic. And when I went out to India and I was living in a Tibetan monastic university in Sera in South India, that's when I realized that Tibetans are people like you and me. Some of them are good and some of them are not so nice. Some of them are brilliant and some of them are not. So there was a process there. So what I teach now when I come to mindfulness, mindfulness is a natural function of the human brain. It's not Tibetan, it's not Buddhist, it's just human. It's something that we don't need to learn it. We're born with it. The moment you're born, you're full 100% mindful. That's all you've got. You don't have memories. You don't have language. You don't know how to think. You just have impressions and you're aware of what's going on around you. So that is the mindfulness that we use, that simple awareness. And of course, it gets harder because you've accumulated all these ideas and especially this sense of identity. And that's really what gets in the way. Ego is not just a concept. It's a yearning. It's a defensive, it's a whole, it triggers a whole sequence, a whole squadron of defensive reactions. And the purpose of mindfulness is to get to the root of that reactivity and to see that that's not me, that's just something I'm doing. That thought is not me, it's just the thought passing through my mind. I can let go. And gradually we loosen those bonds to this idea that I'm something permanent, that I need, but especially that I need to defend myself all the time. Once we let go of that, then the amount of freedom in your life is unbelievable. And the amount of creativity that comes into it is extraordinary.
Love it, love it, love it. So again, a ton to unpack here. I love that you called attention for the thing that the grass is greener in the other side. And I think it's a defense mechanism when things are harder and we are facing some challenges. It's easier to think about, is that almost magical thinking? Where is this magical switch? Where if I go there, if I after this, after that, is the if and then kind of thing. When this crisis is end, if I go to that country, if I get a new job, whatever is the situation that we are and think, we have to have hope. I think there is something that we have to recognize that is better that because that gives us hope of something positive.
Oh, yeah.
And at the same time is the learning that even when we arrive there, like in your case, your hope was that magical thing in the Eastern world that will be something that could illuminate in you. You arrive there and to your own journey, you discover that like so many of us in our own journeys, that it's not the destination. This destination is just part of the continuous journey. And they are just humans in the other side, like the rest of us, just human beings with the good and the bad.
Yeah. That's very interesting. You started out with the concept of hope. Hope is absolutely essential. Now, when I'm teaching, one of the things that I keep coming back to again and again and again is as you're practicing mindfulness, there's two things which really interrupt it, which you need to be aware of all the time, and that's expectations and judgments. When you sit down to meditate, when I used to sit down, when I began meditating, I expected to basically go into some sort of trance where I'd be completely focused and it'd be very blissful. And of course, that didn't happen. I just got distracted and I got mad at the people sitting next to me because they were fidgety. Those expectations, and many of the expectations that we have in life, they set us up. Okay. So I advocate letting go of expectations. And then people say to me, what about hope? And it's true. If you don't have hope, you're not going to get out of bed in the morning. Literally, that's exactly what depression is. You don't feel, there's nothing is pulling you. That's what hope is for. It pulls you forward into the future. But if that hope turns into unrealistic expectations, then of course we're not using it well. So again, discernment. It's a whole discernment. We have to know when we're going too far, when we're not going far enough. Find that middle way. That's the challenge. And it's a constant challenge. It's not something where you find, and the Buddhists love to talk about this thing, enlightenment, or sometimes they call it awakening, but they talk about it as a stage or as there's a certain date and time that you reach this point, and afterwards everything's fine. That to me is wishful thinking.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love that. I want to go back to some of the things that you said here because it's so important from a psychological perspective, what you are saying about depression. One of the words that is used, I think was even Martin Seligman, that he did a ton of work in the learn hopefulness. When people learn, or animals lose hope,
Yeah.
that is depression.
Yeah.
And then I think that you keep coming back to discernment. Is that wise discernment that things are not black and white. Things are not, we have to be able to discern when one thing can be of service or not of service. And we know that there are things like letting go of the expectations, of the judgment, can be tools or practices that can be very helpful.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
let me go back a little bit because you also said something before that we are born with the capacity or with the power or with the resource of mindfulness. You said that the baby, when it's born, that is what the baby is, being mindful of the surrounding without a consciousness in the sense of the ego. Correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And seems that we lose a lot of practicing that muscle as we grow older.
Mhm.
And the mindfulness is a way of exercising that muscle.
It's a way of exercising the muscle, and it's a way of disrupting the complacency that comes as we grow up. The sense that I'm grown up now. I'm educated. I'm done. It's, no, there's a lot to do, and there's a lot of rabbit holes you can go down. Be on guard. That's what mindfulness is for. It's about sharpening your life, sharpening your mind, understanding what's possible and what's not possible. And most of all, most important thing, that the fundamental function of mindfulness is to expose your own reactivity so that it's no longer unconscious, so that you see it.
Hmm.
So that when someone walks into the room, somebody you have a history with, and you don't like this person, then there's different ways of approaching this. Some people would say, "Oh, that's Jack. I don't like him." Yeah, no. But I shouldn't not like him. I should like him because he's got this and he's that and he's this sort of, and everyone else likes him. And so that's how denial begins. That's how avoidance happens.
So let's stay there because I think you are touching a very, very important thing. The stimulus and response and trigger. There is a trigger and we react in a certain way. And you are describing a day-to-day situation of, how do you say, that can happen in any of our lives. Tell me how having a practice or that muscle of mindfulness can help us on that, because it's in the moment, it's afterwards, it's both. Tell me a little bit more.
Okay, if you were a student of mine and you came to me with that problem, I've got to see Jack tomorrow and I don't know what I'm going to be. The first thing I would say to you is, as soon as you see him, the first thing you do is you stop, take a breath, just one breath. Now, this doesn't work equally for everybody. If you have a regular mindfulness practice, if you're doing it every day, even if it's only for 2 or 3 minutes, then that breath will have power. It will focus you. It'll bring you home. That's how I think of mindfulness, is being at home. You're right in here, and I'm tapping my chest right now for the listeners. Okay. So you take that breath, and that focuses you, and it makes you also, it brings you into the equation. Instead of simply being defensive and making sure, oh, I hope I get this right, you're also allowing other thoughts in, like this person standing there is just a human being. He's got his reasons for being like this. I don't like him. I want to respect that feeling. But at the same time, I need to manage this situation in a practical way, in a polite way. And so you introduce these variables into your mind. So you're not simply reactive, you're thinking about it. Now, what happens is you go in, you take a breath, and Jack turns to you and says some awful statement, and you just explode. Okay? And you can't contain yourself. And then you think, oh my God, I'm no good at this. I've ruined my practice. I'm a terrible meditator. And I hear this all the time. The point is that you're just beginning. Give yourself a chance. The first time you try this, you're going to get mad within a few seconds. The second time you try it, maybe it's going to be a little longer. You're going to have a little more delay. So what we're doing here, and what mindfulness does, is it introduces a gap, a space between stimulus and response.
Love it.
And you're moving that, you're gradually widening that gap. That is the practice. And it doesn't matter how much you think, I don't care how intelligent you are, if you don't practice it, it won't happen.
And that goes to the core of my favorite quote. Between stimulus and response, there is a space.
Yeah.
In that space is the power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I always say that the tricky thing is, like you are saying, is being able to press the pause button, to be able to see that space that allows us to choose our response.
Yeah.
And the mindfulness can be that practice that allows us to strengthen our mental muscles, that allow us to see that space. It's almost slowing time in order to be able to choose the response. And this is magical, because one of the things that I always say when I speak about personal development and self-development is that we have to practice pauses.
Yeah.
And I usually speak about 3 types of pauses. We have the macro pauses, like going to a retreat. It's a macro pause. You did the extra macro pause in your 8 years in a Buddhist monastery. But let's think about a retreat of even an hour working with an expert. It's a pause that we take intentionally and can be transformational, absolutely. But if we don't do scheduled pauses daily or at least weekly, we get all that power and then we are not practicing. And the practicing of mindfulness is so important. And I think if we have in the schedule, in the ritual of our day to day, because only then it's like going to the gym and become more mentally fit. We are ready for when the situation emerges to be able to see that space and to choose our response. So I call that the 3rd type of pause, that is the micro pause. And that is what is a process, is a training, and it never ends.
Yeah. It's the micro pauses which really do the work. But in order to get to them, you need the encouragement and the reminder that, oh yeah, I'm a meditator. I do this. I sit down and I shut up and I just see what's going on from time to time. And so that becomes a part of your MO.
And because sometimes in the beginning, and we know this from neuropsychology, that, okay, there was a situation, a stimulus, that was a trigger. We didn't manage to see the pause there. We react, not in a way that we are proud of. But then if we forgive ourselves, if we reimagine that, what I would like to do in another, if that happens again, I would like to do something different. It's like rewiring our brain. How, from the mindfulness and the Buddhist perspective, does that forgiveness work?
Forgiveness it's a funny thing. It's you can't just decide to forgive yourself somehow. It's one of the things we do. We get angry, and anger in all societies is looked down upon. And so the easiest way to express it is against yourself. And we beat ourselves up. Forgiveness, there's a concept not just in Buddhism, but in Catholicism too, because I was raised as a Catholic. It's called grace. In Tibetan, it's referred to as merit, sunman. And It's hard to put your finger on. It's God-given, they would say, which means that we can't just make it up. But there comes a point in your life when you've been working on something long enough and it's been frustrating you long enough, but your energy is there and your commitment is there. And then suddenly it just happens. You've earned enough. The Tibetans would say you've earned sufficient merit that you can let go of that particular mental obstacle. So forgiving yourself is really dealing mostly with shame, right? It's that feeling of, oh God, I did that. Oh my God, I can't believe. So I missed that opportunity to get in between stimulus and response. I missed the opportunity to make myself a bit. So I'm piling it on myself. I'm blaming myself. And this is something I hear all the time. It's something I'm constantly dealing with my students. So forgiveness comes from persistence. Just keep doing what you do, and eventually you'll have sufficient courage and confidence to forgive yourself.
I love that. And I think you touch in a very important point, because like you were saying with any practice, and then we try to do it, we put our best intentions and things doesn't work in the way that we expect them to work. And then, oh my gosh, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
And suddenly there are moments, but I see other people that seems that they pass that magical point and things seems to be working better for them. And I think there is something, one image that we can use on this is like the boiling of the water or whatever liquid.
Uh-huh.
We increase the temperature 1 degree at a time. And then if we stop the heat, there is no boiling, there is no transformation. The water is warm, but there is not really, it's just an incremental thing. But if we persist, if we keep going and keep the heat there, the practice there going, and it's the same heat, it's the same practice, but that accumulation 1 degree at a time arrives to the 100 degrees Celsius, and the magical thing happens. Water goes from liquid to gas, to vapor.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a different state. It's a different qualitative state, but only happen because we persist 1 degree at a time, and then it seems that is magical.
It feels that way sometimes. Yeah. And we use words like transformation, and we even talk about the miracle of the present moment. And I don't think we're making a scientific statement here as much as we're just saying that something is possible here that is not entirely explicable. We can explain it, but the point is that when you sit with experience, when you can sit quietly, literally, I mean, this is what I tell people to do: sit down, shut up, stop thinking. And of course, nobody stops thinking. But the point is you try, and then you realize, oh my God, my thoughts are persistent. They keep going. And, oh, this is not what I expected at all. And it's a challenge. A lot of people don't feel good about that. But it's an absolutely essential first step. You have to realize that the mind has a mind of its own, as people like to say, and you've got to let it free even as you try to control it. It's a give and take thing, because you can't completely control the mind. But if you let it go free, that's also going to have its own problems. Again, I keep coming back to the Buddha's middle way. It's not complicated, at least not in theory.
The wise discernment. So tell us, because how do you help people? You have a program that is called the Mindfulness Live, and so tell us a little bit about that, and how can people learn more about you and your work?
Mindfulness Live, I've been teaching in the Montreal area since 2003, been teaching quiet mind seminars. And at the end of each of those courses, people come to me and say, okay, this is great. What's next? And I'd say, you sign up for the next course. And I never felt good about that. I felt like I was abandoning them. And I was talking with my wife, Caroline, who's a life coach. We work very much on the same wavelength. And we said, what is it that people really need? What is the big obstacle here? I mean, I've been so intense in those 20 years on promoting mindfulness and convincing people that mindfulness is a good thing. And then I realized, I don't think I have to do that. Look at the papers, read your newsfeed any day. People love mindfulness. It's all over the place. There's no problem with that. The problem is people aren't doing it. Okay. You go for a 10-week retreat, you go for a 2-day retreat, whatever. People love it. You don't love it while you're there, but at the end you love it and you realize how great it was.
Yeah.
And you want more of it, but you don't have the support. That's what I decided. What we need to give is not long, complicated explanations or philosophical diatribes or any of that. We need to give people support, a routine, a backbone for their practice, a place, a home. And 3 times a week, I teach on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 12 noon for half an hour. Okay? And we do a little meditation, but there's also a discourse. It's about not just about focusing. It's also about adjusting your mindset. And I give people something to think about each time. We have a different topic each week. So what this does is it expands mindfulness from a simple meditative practice to something which is life encompassing. And that's when it really starts to work. You described it as you compared mindfulness to going to the gym, and it's exactly like that. It doesn't matter how strong and how big those muscles are. If you stop working them out, they will shrink.
Yep. It's the reality. And that scheduled pause. We have to honor that.
And at the same time, I don't want people to put too much importance on that half an hour, because it's artificial. Okay, we call it mindfulness practice. It's artificial in the sense that you're in a quiet room and you've scheduled your time and you don't have any interruptions and you're safe. But really, the point of that half hour is to just remind you each day that you're a meditator, that these things matter, that you're going to have opportunities. And then when you do that during the rest of the day, you'll have these little moments where you just focus and you realize, I'm here, I'm present, I'm paying attention. And those are those micro moments of mindfulness you were talking about. And that's where the work actually happens, because you're in conflict, you're in frustration, you're in disappointment, and you're actually seeing your own mental reactivity. And that's where you get to know yourself. Who you are is not your story. It's how you are now, how you behave, how you react in the present moment to whatever stimulus is happening in the real world. That's who you are. And that's changing all the time. So wake up. You really need to bring your mental energy here. And this daily half-hour practice is what will stimulate that and keep you going. It'll feed you.
Wow. So where can people learn more about this program and you and your work?
The program is called Mindfulness Live, and you can check it out at mindfulnesslive.ca.
I will make sure that I will put in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today.
Anna, it's a real pleasure. Thank you for your very wise and provocative questions.
My pleasure.
Expanding possibilities, the mindset zone.
If you can think of a person who will find this episode helpful, please share it. Spreading the word about the Mindset Zone podcast is very powerful. For extra resources, including information about the book and audiobook, Mindset Zone, Actualize Your Human Potential, go to mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com is .zone. As always, I'm so grateful that you are here. Expand what's possible for you, for the ones around you, for the world.